All right. Well, I read your bio. It looked really interesting. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing, and just go from there because it sounds cool. Let's hear
Yeah,
it.
so it's been a it's been an interesting life journey, so to speak, but mostly focused professionally around customer experience. We've called it CRM, sales. We've called it a lot of things, a lot of
Mhm.
three-letter and two-letter acronyms over the years. But we really started out, interestingly enough, as a journalist covering a lot of B2B technology, for magazines like Brand Market or even like Supermarket News to get really specific. Started off on those types of things, and then went over out of the Fairchild and Condé Nast world over to the analyst world with 451 Research. Really helped them build up their top of the stack application practice. And CRM was really getting big at that time. This is when Salesforce was really kind of changing the world with software as a service, and really reinventing a lot of things. And also got involved with a lot of open source vendors and
Mhm.
helping them emerge, get funding with VCs and investment bankers and around that world, and then moved on from there because of the what we called it chaos, which was a funny name. The commercial adoption of open source at 451 got
Well,
me
everybody knows life
introduced.
is chaos, right? So
Exactly right. It was
perfectly
very
fits right in.
you know very metaphysical. But the vendors that I was covering at the top of the stack, like Sugar CRM, really stood out to me. They were doing some interesting things with commercial open source at the time, and they were my first kind of foray into the dark side, right? Going onto the vendor, and really started to hone inbound marketing, because that's what kind of started at that time, and helping a company that wasn't as huge or didn't have the big, hundreds of million in VC that others like Salesforce and others had, learning how to, and with partners and with friends like Dharmesh and Brian at HubSpot. Really, we were kind of the first people to really build out that inbound model, but also, while at the same time being thought leaders around what was happening in sales automation, marketing automation, support and call center automation, and where that was all merging to become CX. So really spending a lot of time at Sugar and at other startups that I've either advised or been a part of, really helping just kind of change the way that we market, change the way that we work, even in general, when it comes to the I call it the kind of UX as EX, right? Employee experience as well. So really kind of being a part of that world now for the last 20 years, and really, thinking about that. And that's really where my mind's been, and where the kind of epicenter of where we see a lot of colliding technologies over the last 10, 15 years: cloud, mobile, social, and now really AI, analytics, IoT, all these things coming together to change the way that employees do their jobs, the way that customers engage and interact, and really partner with companies, because that's what we're seeing now, right? Is subscription economy is a big part of that. So all these things are converging, and really being on top of that, both from what I do with the vendor side and what I do from my thought leadership side, has really been exciting. It's been a wild decade or two, really.
And it's just going to get even wilder, right? I mean, that's basically where
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing. And COVID is really, it's a lot of people think it's kind of its own thing, but in a weird way, it's kind of a proof point for all the things that we've been doing. And it's really, that's what's been exciting, is for those who listened and started doing the right things, COVID has been less of an intrusion and more of an
Mhm.
opportunity. And I don't want to lighten anything that COVID is, right? Because it's really serious. But it really has, we've seen the writing on the wall for something like this, and understanding what the future of work really means. We had a whole campaign we did, and I did this big video years ago around future of work and what it was, and we called it Work Like You Live. And now people are kind of forced to do that. And we've really, like, it was more prophecy than anything else. Being at home, having that work-life balance really be tested, has been kind of an exciting proof point for the type of things that we've tried to do for the cloud, for mobile, for headless communications. All those types of things that we're seeing are really coming together, and we're kind of forced to do it now. So it's been exciting.
Yeah. Well, you know what it's like. I mean, change only occurs when there's disruption, right?
Yep.
So unless you're
Yeah.
forced into it, because we've had these tools and technologies for the longest time. I mean, years and years.
Yes.
When did we start telecommuting, right? So it's been 10, 15, 20 years when we could have actually worked from anywhere all the time, but nothing's made us do it. All these companies,
Yes.
even the most innovative companies, don't do it, or they didn't do it. And now they're forced to do it. And all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, we could have done this all this time. I mean,
Muscle
just
memory
think,
is
if you
crazy.
think about what you can saved, right?
Yeah, but it is, like corporate culture has really strong muscle memory, right? And it retains a lot of things for better or worse, sometimes and quite often worse. And I've brought startups out of stealth, and they were insistent upon having an office in downtown San Francisco. I says, we're 18 people. We've got only 2.5 million in funding, and you want to waste how much a month on a lease on an office when most of our people are in Portland. We have a few in San Francisco. We've got people, intelligent people that we're hiring remotely in lower cost centers, out of, at the time, Denver and Boulder, and you see these things, and yet still the board was insistent upon having these things. And you say, FaceTime's important. It's like, yeah, well, it is, but now we have a thing called FaceTime and now Zoom. So we have these things, the virtual, and I'm not saying it's because the board members are typically sometimes 50, 60 year old and over, and they're set in their ways. Sometimes it's just you think company culture means one thing, and it doesn't always mean that. And what a hub means to keep people together. I just wrote a blog post on the SugarCRM blog about that. Around company hubs can be completely virtual now, and culture can be sustained in really exciting virtual ways. FaceTime is fun, and after COVID, we're going to have elements of that, right? We're going to build corporate buildings and commercial space and real estate is not going away, but how we build teams, how we sustain teams, maintain teams, and culture is going to change. And like you said, compelling events force that, and this is a sea change event for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I just recently did a study with one of our clients on working from home or working from anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And we couldn't find one thing. I think the only thing we could find that was a downside was that you wouldn't be in the office to capture serendipitous contacts or serendipitous projects that just sort of came down the pipe. But if you think about it, if everyone's out of the office, then nobody's going to be in the office to catch these serendipitous things, and things are going to be different anyway. And the other that is that if you look at all the positive aspects of people being where they are, like the lack of commute, the health issues that people have on these commutes, you've got divorces that are higher, mental wellness, physical wellness, costs, environmental issues. I mean, you think about all the traffic that's putting out all that carbon dioxide, right? So, or carbon monoxide. So there's just so many positives to this.
Absolutely.
I think that people are still chafing against it. And I think maybe the biggest thing is because the kids are out. Like if the kids were back at school, then why couldn't we all work at home full time? Because that's the issue that most people have, as far as I know.
Yeah. I think that's, it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's going to change so many things after the fact. And that's what's exciting to me you're hearing and you see a lot of things around, how we're in a very interesting time politically right now. That's, let's tiptoe around as much as we can without being too, but what's going to be interesting is areas that leaned a certain way are going to change, because once people are able to work from anywhere, and that's the big thing, work from home, work from anywhere, those are different concepts, right? Because a lot of times people equate work from home with partially remote. You're working from home because I typically don't. You're saying from home because that's different from when you're only working. I'm going to work from home today, but work from anywhere, meaning your office is with you, and there might not be any offices, right? That's going to change because you just look at California and how many, we have 40 million people here. How many people work in tech, and how many of those people would love to be in Montana, Austin, Texas, other parts of Utah, because they're outdoorsy. It's just one example of the diaspora of tech workers is going to shift political balances, right? When you think of how elections sometimes at state, local levels, and even national levels can hinge upon, a few thousand votes in certain districts. And if people move to certain areas, we're going to have different representation and different things. So it's really exciting how the long tail of this is we're not even scratching the surface of it, not just from the better life that you just described, the ability for people to have more time, to have a better life balance, to remove sometimes 2.5 hours out of their day that was spent in a car wanting to, if either of us had hair, we'd be pulling it out, right? That kind of thing, but it's that kind of, it's going to change. And and like you said, the positives absolutely outweigh the negatives. I myself, you'll look behind me, there's an empty wall because my family's moving, because we can move further out to better schools, more square footage, at a, at a pool where, closer to San Francisco was just not, wasn't going to be viable for us, right? So it's a completely different world, and it's really interesting to see the paradigm shift that's happening.
Well, especially around here where you see all these condos going up where people are paying $4,000 a month to live in a tiny little box near a BART station. It's like, why would you do that? You can live anywhere and you can work from anywhere if if you were with a tech company. And nowadays, if I were to start a new company, I would make it totally virtual. Why even bother having offices? Why not save the money?
Yeah.
Right?
And like I said, and it's crazy. I think now people have seen the light. Like I said, I was starting, this was 10 years ago when I was advising startups to do this and to go virtual. And a lot of the times it was always, the reasons why they would do it were always interesting. There was always, again, it's the compelling need is, oh, well, the developers need to know Erlang, and there's only 900 of them that are qualified certified in the world. We're not going to get those guys from Oslo to come work out of, out of Soma. So, you kind of, those guys, sometimes there's compelling issues, but we learn from that, right? We learn that it's like, okay. And then you're also only paying that guy X, even though he's in, a pretty expensive area like Norway, and you're not paying him, you're not competing with Google to hire out of Mountain View, so it's an interesting thing that everyone's gonna learn from, and I think it's gonna change a lot of things. One of the things it is gonna enforce is that the tech workers they're the factory workers of the greatest generation. That's the next thing is they're becoming more and more of a, I don't want to say commoditized because they do interesting things, but these are the guys where they're going to be less a premium because we're going to be able to democratize hiring, and it's going to be a more level playing field. So, but that's also going to bring salaries down, but it's going to help startups get out there quicker and to staff more quickly and to make really interesting technology. And yet these guys are going to have great lives, but they don't have to go and go to the most expensive hubs in the country or the world to do it. I think that's what's really going to be interesting.
Well, speaking of another broken thing, when you talk about talent acquisition, I mean, we're still doing it the way we've been doing it for God knows however. I mean, why don't we bring some AI into it? Well, they're going to get Amazon tried, but look what happened there, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, that's what's always interesting, right? Is because what's always been, and this is one thing, we just purchased an AI company called Node, and what we loved about them at Sugar was the amount of third-party data that they already have, where you're not trying to set it. It's really just encompassing mass amounts of data to create its arrays and understand it and build those neural networks. Because when you try to put, a kind of an algorithm against a small set of data to figure out who you're hiring, it's not always going to be great. But if you're doing it against like the entire population of the world and every bit of performance indicators that we could have and get, you're going to do better, right? So again, it's data, right? I mean, everything comes down to data these days. But I think it's really interesting that you could put a lot more AI to that. And I think, again, there's heuristics around some of these things, but also there's a lot of really great things that you can do around the inputs of, human interactions against that. So you're mixing all these things to create a much richer data set to hire, where you're not just looking at, where do they go to school? What do they do to consider the people? Is you're still going to consider people based on, a lot of things, but then you're going to understand their performance maybe a little better based on some personality things that you're not going to get through just raw data AI from the outset. So it's throughout the process you should be adding the AI. So I think that'll be really interesting how to do that, because we did one of the use cases in the company that we're not really using too much because we're more on the sales and automation. We want people to do better with their customer relationships, was employee churn analysis and understanding that. Because of the bigger data sets and doing that, it was much more accurate rather than just putting an algorithm against the data that because that's like 5% of the data around a human being that you're ever going to collect. So let's put it against, hundreds of thousands, if not hundreds of millions of data points, and you can do a lot better. So it's really interesting to see how that's going to change too, because, you can open up, we're going to have difficulty because we are going to open up our hiring process to, exponentially more people if we are open to anyone anywhere. Right? So you're creating a challenge for recruiting teams, right? So you can do some segmentation, so to speak, through AI, but I think the downstream hiring process needs to be updated with AI as well, and it needs to incorporate much broader and much more interesting data sets and arrays, because there are there's going to be, the ability to record a conversation like this and do analysis on it. That's going to be far richer than someone analyzing an application or a survey, right? So it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I was reading a science fiction novel which had AIs automatically monitoring everybody else in the world. And if they found a better mate for you, they would actually send you an email and say, you should probably go break up with this person and go out with this person. And that's what happened to the guy's wife. He said, oh, my wife divorced me because she got a better offer in email.
Oh, wow.
Maybe it'll be the same thing with jobs. It'll be like, I'm sitting here, I'll get an email which says, hey, we've scanned you. We know you're perfect for this position. It's 20% more than what you're making. Click on this DocuSign link and accept the job right now. And I'm like, whoa.
I don't know if we're quite ready for that. I think, but it is interesting. I mean, I must think of like, how do you run a test of someone to see if they would do that? And then they're not a loyal employee.
Exactly.
But and that's what's interesting is what we are going to have to learn is how to instill culture in a remote way. And I don't think we have all the answers, but I think culture is really important in where people choose to work, and why they stay at jobs. But their most important culture is their home culture, right? What they're doing with their families, what they're even doing if they're single, and how they live their lives, and enabling people to have more of that is going to be good corporate culture by default. Yeah. So it's kind of like, the people that do this well and manage manage expectations and are results oriented, not metering people when they're at their desk in a remote work environment, but rather, how productive they are and how interactive and collaborative they are and how much they help others as well as get their own jobs done, and rewarding that. That's going to go, because then people can, if they want to go mountain biking at 2 p.m. because that's the best time, they can go do that and just turn their stuff off and not have a meeting. And if they work at 6 or 7 or 9 or midnight, that time counts too, because how many times were we going into the office and also still doing work at home? So it's really, we have to stop the idea of, the punching a clock is dead anyway, right? So for knowledge workers, so we're getting there.
Work, if you ask me, is become what's the word I was looking for? It's like it's modular now, right? So there's like, instead of one giant block, it's not monolithic anymore. It used to be monolithic. You would drive to the office, you do your block of work, and then you drive home. Right now, it's like, I do a little work, I do a little this, do a little this, do a little this, and work might be split up amongst all sorts of different time blocks all over the day, and even on the weekends or whatever. And it's so like when you talk about work-life balance, it's just you're balancing moments instead of giant blocks. So
it's kind of like, I mean, and it is tough for people to make that change. It's easier for some, and it's always funny. It's like when the first time you go to Europe and you like, why are the stores closed at like 2 p.m. on a weekday? And you realize it's siesta time in Spain or something, and those people have understood the modularity of things, and they can do that pretty well. I mean, and we've got to get into that more mindset of being more results oriented, more modular, like you said, and especially, until the kids go back to school, because, for us, it's, read your emails, and then you're giving the kid breakfast, taking them for a walk. And, we've got really small kids, but it's, they're not even in school yet. So this is even crazier, because you can't have anyone in the house to watch kids, and you're still trying to be productive, but you're finding ways to do it, because we're going out, going for the walk, running in the park, coming back, having a meeting, and it's sometimes you're running back from the park because you realize, oh no, I gotta get I'm at 11 o'clock, but it's but this is working, it's you're getting things done, and there hasn't been, for anyone in my department, any slip ups in productivity. If not, I think we're being more productive, because I think it's, I think everyone's using it as an opportunity to try new things, to be more inventive, just be more innovative, and it's really been exciting. We've drawn out some new web properties, new companies that we've acquired and integrated them, whole new messaging, an entire new positioning, all since the pandemic started, and we those things we used to do like every 2 years. So I think we've been actually more productive, which is crazy, because I think people are just working on the right things. A lot of that stuff goes away. A lot of meaningless meetings go away. It's really great.
That's right. It's all intentional. I think I was reading that the other day. That's
a good term. I like that.
Intentional as opposed to unintentional, right? Where somebody's just wandering by your office and you waste 20 minutes. but now it's like you have to call them or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm always struggling with CRMs. Always. What makes Sugar better than anything else? I mean,
I mean,
what's
better's
special
different. I'll say
sauce?
different. I hate superlatives like that, or comparatives. But so what we focused on years ago, back, again, like we were a lot like everyone else in terms of like, I would say like UX design, because we were all taking Siebel and putting it in a web browser in the
Because
early
I hope you don't like
2000s.
Salesforce because I hate that interface.
Well, yeah, but and we all followed Salesforce because, look, we all followed Salesforce because we were all following Siebel.
Yeah.
And Salesforce was ex-Siebel people. And it was like, their main differentiator was you didn't have to deploy and maintain software, and you didn't pay a perpetual license, right? For better or worse. And that's the only differentiator they ever had,
Yeah.
right? And the problem is they're still basically selling that same product
No, I mean, I
20
look at it
plus
now,
years later.
what is this? Is it like 1988?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, is that it looks like a relational database threw up on a screen, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes down to it, you really, you have to step back, and you have to take a fresh concept, right? And you say, okay, well, what was good about these things? What was bad about these things? And we redesigned wholly our UX back in 2013. So we're now like about 7 years ago. And we were the first people to do this. So what we did was, we did inline editing on everything, which you couldn't do at the time. Before, you had to like open up a whole screen to edit. There used to be edit screens that used to exist,
Mhm.
and these are simple things, but and they go a long way. Any field can be a calculated field, so you can actually start to understand things like when you're building invoices, when you're building opportunities, quotes, these types of things. They all just happen, right? You put a number in, and if your standard flat discount is 5%, it always puts that in. So your rep doesn't have a calculator by the side, that kind of thing. They're not tabbing around. We had the dashboards on the side, not a separate place. Because
Mhm.
if you were looking at, if you're a renewals person, you want to look at, well, how many open support cases do these guys have? What have they bought in the past before I took this up? Before, you didn't see that. You just saw a record, and you had to go hunt for that stuff.
Yeah.
So aggregating data rather than just having a database view, right? Making reporting, intuitive and easy. Making mobility we were one of the first people to have mobile that wasn't and it took us a long time to get it right. I think we had three or four false starts, let's call it, and everyone else did too. But making mobile a wholly different usage experience by learning from the consumer world of applications, rather than trying to shrink down business applications for a tablet, and understanding that certain things work differently, right? And doing that kind of stuff, creating SDKs so people could build their own mobile, net new mobile applications that extended from data that would never even touch the CRM system, right? And yet it updated in lockstep and maintain, it was easy maintenance. Moving, we did a lot of things differently that were people like, we could give you on-site stuff, when Salesforce wouldn't, for example, right?
Mhm.
And everyone was going to the cloud, but now we've realized everything's in the cloud, right? Other things that we've done is, like I said, just from a UX perspective, is just really just build what we call, like kind of purpose-built kind of stuff, right? Where we've had for about a year or so now, we've had a renewals console, right? Where before, if you were using us, you also kind of, to really understand when things were coming up and to manage that process. If you weren't using us, you would probably be using like a Salesforce or Microsoft or whatever your CRM sales is. Then also like Azura.
Mhm.
And then possibly for the workflow between that, you might be using like a Pega Systems if you're really expensive, or Pure or something like that. Like, you're using, and we've kind of crunched those three things into one, where you can close a deal, but also if you're doing renewal business, or if you're doing subscriptions, if you're a tech company, or if you're, a telco or whatever you are, and sometimes it's professional services. They deal on renewable contracts, like, it could be anything from, we use Gartner, right? Or someone like that. I'm renewing that, Gartner, if they want to figure those things out, right? You're looking at your Accenture, retainer contract, your legal retainer contract, these things renew, and they're expected to renew unless you really screw it up, right? So
Mhm.
how do we automate the process of creating the opportunities and the records and the and the content that's going to be part of that, the documents and things, auto-generate those, but also auto-generate the reminders around that customer journey and the pipeline management and the forecasting and all those types of things. So where before that just wasn't done.
Yep.
You know, Salesforce still today, as you know, as much as I know of that, is you create an opportunity, you close it, that's it.
Yep.
But that's not how the world
Unless
works
you
anymore,
unless you
especially in
set a quota or
B2B.
something like that, you can
Yeah, but that's so manual. Why isn't that automated? So what we saw that, I said, look, you close it, you close an opportunity for the first time, and then if it's 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, we create all these milestones, we create all these alerts, we create all these tasks, and then all these other things around the actual invoice that gets set up and sent out. All that stuff gets automated, right? And then what we can also understand is, you know, in the head of that with the AI that we have is what are the opportunities, you know, and then what would make a renewal not likely to renew, right? So how do we alert you, not just with the milestone alerts, which can be set pretty easily, right? That's, you know, you do your QBRs, reminder to call this guy and set your reviews, but also it's, okay, now we're starting to look at third party and other data and system data and logins and all that kind of stuff, you know, even in our own business, and saying, hey, this trending factor is telling us you need to do extra work, right? Or, you know, even if it's a new business opportunity, it's, you know, with someone you know, or if someone you don't know, it's don't bother, right? How do we tell people not to bother? Because sometimes there's noise, right? You know, salespeople are like baseball players, right? You know, if they have a 350 average, they're in the Hall of Fame, right? And what about those 6.5 deals out of the 10 that they do that just blow up or fizzle or just weren't ever real? How do we get rid of that? You know, not that they're going to bat 1,000, but, you know, how do we bring them up to 550, right? How do we 600? How do we double their close rates without effort, right? Reduce noise, right? And that's what we do differently, right? Because we do that that's the out of the box product that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about crazy, you'll go to one of these events of any of our competitors and they bring out these crazy stories, but you know, when you start to peel back the onion, right? It's, well, this was actually Accenture building this with 5 different other, you know, an RPA and an AI and an analytics. And we just do this, right? We've made, you know, key acquisitions and developments over the last 3-4 years to do all this. What we call the time-aware CXP, which is our customer experience, customer data platform, people might call them, to really do time stamping at every second, you know, and microseconds, right? Because we want to know the delta of everything, because the white space is almost as important. So many analytics things need an action. So many event-driven marketing, event-driven sales. It needs the event, but what about the time between events? Sometimes that's critical. If someone hasn't called you back, if someone isn't answering your emails, or you haven't reached out to them, that white space is almost more important than the action, right? So understanding time as both a positive and a negative in terms of, you know, white space, those are things that we do differently, right? And I'd like to say different, I'm better, maybe, you know, because it's about better business outcomes. That's what I would say is, are we a better product? Well, you know, maybe, but it's really about being different, because we want to make better business outcomes an afterthought, right? Because, and that's what it comes down to. We call it HDCX, right? It's a cute thing that we've thought out. You know, we have better data, we have better AI in that idea, because you can use our hint data services to bring data in to learn more about your customers. Like I said, the Node acquisition, which is now Sugar AI, analyzes third-party data and all this types of stuff to give you much more reliable, predictable, and prescriptive insights. And that's about better business outcomes, because you have, you know, much more predictability, gives you better performance, and then you're going to get better outcomes, right? Because like I said,
Go ahead. I love this white space. How did you? Where did you come up with it? Because I never thought of it. It's like everything is so event driven, but there is no. You're right. There is nobody paying attention to those white spaces.
I'd love to take 100% credit. I really would. I would. And you know, but it wasn't 100% me. No. So we actually, our chief product officer, Rich Green, is like, when he gives like keynotes, it's really like it's like a physics lesson. And he thinks about these things, and he thinks about things like really interesting ways. And he thought about the time aware stuff pretty early on. And he said, you know, one of the reasons, you know, there's a lot of reasons why we moved to like a cloud first, if not cloud only kind of model for our product set. Like I said, we were differentiated in that people could use us on site, they could use us in a hybrid situation. But what we realized was when they're running on our platform, right, we can do these types of things for them, where, like I said, we can start to measure the white space. We figure out the time deltas, and we can figure out what is interesting, right? What's an anomaly? What is a moment that they should care about? and then be able to push that to them because they're on our platform, right? So because most other people are running analysis on things using data warehouses, it's kind of off in the parking lot, right? And that's not real time. That doesn't happen at the point of interaction. It doesn't get into the UX of for the, again, and that's our user focus. Like I said, really focusing on things for the user. You know, we call it no touch, right? How do we make this stuff seamless so that a guy isn't typing a bunch of stuff, no user, she's not going in and typing all day. She's getting insights back, right? It's the Google paradigm, right? It's not like, Siebel, like I said, where anything that was in there was something you probably put in there in your account of, you, the user, if you're a sales guy, for example. But as with Google, what do I put in 2 words and I get back how many millions of potentially useful things? And the idea is take that Google concept and then refine it, right? Is say, I don't want a million things back. I want 1 thing back, 2 things back that are extremely insightful and extremely helpful, extremely useful to make me more productive, right? Give me a potentially better business outcome. And that's kind of our dream and our vision. And Rich was really, he's been huge with all this. I mean, he's the catalyst, but he really thought about that white space concept, because the idea of, time measurement is typically has to be endpointed by something. But if we're actually using the streaming things and all this type of stuff, you can also understand when something doesn't happen. And that's what's really cool. And that's really the cool thing. And it really kind of came about trying to figure out SLAs. Lead SLAs, like how quickly we can get to a lead, and how quickly, or a case or things like that, because we do all that stuff, and understanding, well, how do we know when it's not happening,
Right?
And how do we be proactive around that, right? So you had to start to understand measurement and then you had to start to put some algorithms and averages and all that type of stuff, so that you're starting to count nothing, right? Nothing happening, and understanding that, right? So you're creating a countdown for everything that happens in the system, and you're time stamping it against it, because it's like, did this change? No. Okay. Did this change? Yes. Okay. Now you know that. But if the no's start accruing to a point where it's out of field, to create an alert, right? So it's really it's simple in effect when you talk about it like this, but running it on a system, where we have some of our deployments are 90,000 people that could be using the system at any given time, starts to get a little more complex. So it took us a few years to develop, and now we're full running with it. And it's really exciting, because that's going to power, like I said, all different types of alerts that come from action and inaction. And that's the really cool thing, because, what's happening, right? In a contactless world, more people, or we should say we have less people to deal with more customers, more accounts, right? And in a COVID, with COVID and all that. So understanding who you're forgetting, and us, being able to remind people, hey, you have a pretty important account you haven't talked to in 3 days, or someone called you and you haven't called them back in 8 hours. Sometimes it's 2 hours, sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's 2 months. But that white space and understanding that is critical. Whether that's just, here's the list of people you might want to call, up to critical, call this person because you're out of SLA at this point. That's the kind of stuff that we can do, and that's very different. People aren't doing that out of the box, and we are.
Yeah. No, I love that, because it's just so, it sort of keys to human nature, right? Because there's so many people just let things slide, and you need that monitor to make sure, is this happening? Is this happening? Is this happening? Right? Because I think it's kind of like everyone's so proactive on the event generation side, but when things are missing, that's when things just fall through the cracks. And if you can capture that, if you can mine those gaps and deal with them before they become, super serious, then, you've covered off everything that's left.
Absolutely. And there's really cool things that we can do. And these are just simple and very practical examples, but like, we've got shift management capability, and this could be used in any capacity. But think of, people who are remote answering, phone calls or emails and cases. And then, they can type in and set in, they can be like, okay, I'm going to take this 35-minute break because I have to go feed my kids or change my baby, or 20 minutes. And then we can start to intelligently route and analyze that, because we know that the amount of time that they typically do this and then take to respond to this will either put them in or out of SLA. We can do smart round robin routing and all that kind of stuff. And that sounds so simple and such like oh, well, duh. But other systems can't do that as easily, because, without someone, with someone proactively saying, okay, I'm going to do, and it can be preset too. You can obviously say, like, this is lunchtime, here's my shift. and inside, let's call it a physical virtual call center, which sounds weird to say, but when you've got people working more regular stuff, but you can also make it super, super nimble to understand the time element when people are having more disrupted lives, right? So you can actually figure out, okay, how many cases can Sally really work in a day because of the reality, and you can actually kind of pivot on that. So there's some really cool things that we can do with the system because we have that CXP underneath, and that's the kind of stuff that I think makes us a little different, a little more, again, the end users like it because we have great UX and we do all that stuff, but really what happens is we're trying to streamline and make businesses efficient and do it in ways that's kind of out of the box, where you're not going in there, you're not hard coding, you don't need the partners helping you get set up in like a few days or a few weeks. We just built out this omni-channel capabilities, really powered a lot of it through Amazon, really working as with that relationship as much as we can, because their connect capabilities give us AI powered interaction flows where you can go out there and you can go and spend months building this stuff in Twilio and then trying to integrate it with a Salesforce, right? And that's and it's probably going to work fine once you do it. Twilio is a great platform, but for us, we can build this stuff in like 12 minutes, to get your initial IVR flow going, right? Then when you want to get it to the next level and you want it to be personalized, you want it to be, you want it to be intelligent and AI powered, where it can actually start to answer questions for you and do all that. You can start to you can do that. And again, you talk about modular, you can do that in a phased approach. And the great thing is you're not paying anybody anything except for when people call you, and it's like 2 cents or whatever for each call minute, or however many fractions of a cent for, and you can do these in chats. And the great thing is the modeling works whether it's a chat or it's a call, and we're fully integrated that so that customer history comes in, this gets archived, this gets recorded. There's sentiment analysis that you can do, so then you can start to understand what someone's typing in a chat or saying on the phone without even talking to a human. Maybe we should escalate this without them saying they want to escalate it. And even if the system can handle the issue, maybe you want to put a human on there, because what they're writing or what they're saying, you're sensing that emotion, you're sensing they're not happy with how things are going, right? And even though the AI is working perfectly and bringing the right things up, that person might not be having it, right? So you can understand that, and you can get to that in like weeks, rather than months or years to build those types of, before, where you had like, oh, here's my IVR thing, and then here's my PBX, and then here's my customer database, here's my ERP, here's my CRM, here's my agent desktop, here's all these things. Now it's like it's 2 things, right? And really you're buying them in one place because we have it all seamlessly embedded, and that's what's really exciting. That's what really excites me about us building on, being more of a cloud company and really engaging and having a relationship with AWS to make these things default, right? Whereas before, with anyone else who's not engineered in Amazon, the proprietary guys, the Salesforces, Microsoft has its stuff mostly on Azure, right, as a default, right? And Azure's probably great, but it doesn't have the kind of external, other stuff that we can consume, like comprehend, like Lex, like all that kind of stuff. There's a really cool thing, Kafka and all that stuff, and the AI capability. So for us to be able to consume that, so that we're just giving it out of the box and ready to go, people don't have to build things, or they don't have to wait for things, and they still don't have to buy things, right? They're getting it as part of their stuff. So it's so it's a lot more seamless, and that's what's really cool. So I think we're really at a tipping point. A lot of this stuff has just happened in the last year and a half for us. So it's been an exciting time. And the cool thing is a lot of this stuff really does help us help our customers who are seeing major disruption pre, during, and post COVID. And COVID is just part of it, right? Everyone's been, manufacturers are seeing changes to a subscription economy, right? They're needing people to join rather than buy, right? That's a different world for manufacturers. They never did that before. Then COVID comes along, right? Now they're having to deal with remote workforce and trying to be, how does a manufacturer deal with a remote workforce? It used to be shop floors and things like that, right? How do they interact with distributors and do that in a way that's just, so we're building out our portals in different ways so they can actually have, anybody log in and start being, successful without it being like a named user and being expensive like with our other competitors. So really, we're just trying to be as flexible and nimble as we can, so our guys can do that too for our customers. Can be as flexible and nimble, because everybody's got to be more flexible, right? That's been the driving. That's the imperative right now.
Yeah. So where do you see the future for this? I mean, where are you going next? Where's CRM going next? I mean, beyond what you've got now. I mean, you've got an amazingly, the system's amazing. It can do a lot, but What's next?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, it's like headless, right? In that, like, how much of this is just the brain, right? And how much of this is starts to configure itself and starts to
Mm,
learn, and because right now, like I said, the AI that we're putting in is telling us interesting things, and it's doing lots of cool stuff, and it's going to do stuff on its own, but it's also sometimes has to be pointed in the right directions. But the idea of kind of learning networks and headless things where my phone is my CRM, not the app on my phone is my
mhm,
CRM. Do you know what I mean? Like, because today it's still like, whether you're using Sugar, whether you're using Salesforce, whatever, I got to go and have my app kind of running and doing things really to gain any value out of the CRM element from it, right? But
yeah,
now, but next is how does everything in my world, my calendar, my contacts, the job I'm doing, the projects I'm working on, the people I work with internally, externally, third party, partners, things like that. How does that all get mixed up into a soup and in the AI? And the brain just tells me, here's what you should be doing. Here's what you should
mhm,
be working on. This is the content that you've created, or you need to create, and really understanding that type of stuff. And it's going to be piecemeal. Like, we're going to be working on that very slowly. But
yeah,
the first stage is we created a new nurture builder that we just put out, where it's far more dynamic. We in marketing speed, we call things nurtures, but I don't even think we should call it that. It's really an engagement designer
yeah,
that is starting to become more dynamic and starting to become self-learning. And that's the type of stuff that happens, right? Where so much of the business relationship happens without mediation, let's call it, right? So how do I start to have myself learn where it's gonna respond back with content and with answers and with other things that we can rely on, not hope is right, right? Because and then how does it generate content, right? It's not because because now all of us in the marketing world, whether it's our stuff, whether it's Marketo, whether it's Salesforce's stuff, right now if the content's not in the system, it can't render up to a user. But how
mhm,
does it start to create content? How does it start to understand? You talk about modular, like, how does it start to understand? Well, they want this. The prospect is looking for an answer or for a solution or for this. How do we put this all together? And without a human even being part of the process on the other end, right?
yeah,
That's some cool stuff. And then when they're ready to talk to a human, that human can visibly see their path. They understand what they looked at, what they were presented with, and they can look at this together, right? And there's other companies out there. There's a company that I advise for called Rise that's really building these types of things, auto-generated content based on intent and all that kind of stuff. And I think
mhm,
that's really exciting. And I think that's where we're going. Sugar's going there, the industry's going there, at the front end of it. And then when we're doing it, it's really, how do we start to communicate more effectively? How do we, not have to type ever, right? How do we take no touch from a vision to a reality for us? That's going to be really great. How do I just talk to, whether it's for me, whether it's Alexa, whether it's Google, whether it's whatever, Siri, whoever, how do I talk to my phone? How do I talk to devices? How do I just look at my laptop and say something to it and I get what I need? That, truly no touch. And then on the AI side, it's AI everywhere, right? It's self-learning. It's doing things. It's the AI not just telling me. Before it was like, what do we want to learn from? It's like, predict the future for me. And now where we're kind of starting to scratch at, right, is tell me what to do because you've predicted the future. The
mhm,
next is do it. Do as much as you can in that automated fashion, right, for the customer.
yeah,
Because, and that's where I see the really cool thing for, we deal with a lot of manufacturers. And as you think of like subscription and pull kind of coming together in concepts, right? Where we have IoT and we have smart networks and we have all this AI coming, where we can be the system where someone just sends you what you need because we understand that you need it. And we're as connected to your sensor networks as anyone else. So we know, it's the forever thing of sending the people the toner for their photocopiers before they
exactly,
even know they need
exactly.
it. It's the water refill that doesn't think, I'm just going to send you 4 bottles. And sometimes you were out before you got the refill. It's like it's in time delivery. It's all that kind of stuff, helping our customers create those types of, before you even know you need it, actions. Because
Mhm,
it's the best we can do now in any system is probably tell a salesperson that the person probably needs something.
right.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. But it's, how does the salesperson just get the notice that the invoice was signed,
Yeah.
you know and how do they, and that person works on like relationships, not not product sales, right? How do we move on from that? How do we move on from like, we're actually creating cultural and vision alignment and saying, okay, well, this AI now is telling me, for the next phase of things, here's what we can do to develop. I'm a trusted advisor to you. I'm not a salesman, right?
Mhm.
I'm looking at the things you're doing and the reality of your business and saying, yeah, each of these orders that is the same is going, because you've said it that you only want the 5 bottles, but each one keeps coming, we're giving shorter intervals. So I'm telling you, either change your interval stuff or order more bottles as part of your recurring ship. How am I advising you to make your stuff better? And that can be, like I said, that's water bottles, that's toner, that's piping, that's aluminum siding, that could be anything. It could be fencing materials, it could be anything, right? If we
Yeah.
can build that so that all of our customers, for their downstream customers, are trusted advisors because they have this information, and a lot of stuff just happens automatically because there's trust and you're trusting this reliable analytics because the data is real, right? We're getting it from consumption data. That's really cool. That's where I see things going. Because today, nobody's doing anything even remotely like that. As much as they say they are, but no one's doing
Yeah.
that. At least when it comes to the CRM stuff. Some of the ERP businesses can do better, like procurement and things like that. And they can start to get smart with that. And people are doing all right with that. But when it comes to the CRM side, the sales audit, the relationship building, no one's doing anything remotely like that. We want to get there first. We really want to leapfrog on that.
Yeah. If you think about it, actually, you're talking about a Centaur here, right? It's a combination human machine, right? And the
Yep.
human machine, it's
Love
like
it.
whatever the human's dropping, the machine picks up and vice versa. And they'll communicate with each other and like, oh, you need to talk to your customer because XYZ, I found all this out for you. Talk to them. And then your salesperson will be talking to the machine and saying, well, didn't you know, blah, 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 blah. So they'll be working together in concert to be able
Yep.
to have all this stuff happen, and the human will do whatever's best for the human to do, and the machine will do what's best for the machine to do. So
Exactly. Exactly.
fantastic. I can't wait for this kind of future. I want this stuff to just show up, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the technical debt of legacy deployments, and we're getting to the age where like first generation SaaS is
Yeah.
legacy.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
And that stuff is so inflexible because it's
Mhm.
still, you got stuff still running on racks, that people are, managing themselves. That's
Yeah.
bonkers that not all of this stuff is on Amazon. And that's the whole thing is, when you start to see, it was kind of like the future started to look good when you started to see companies with like .io, right? And you started to see APIs as a service. So you start to see this kind of stuff where the data becomes an afterthought, and you can trust the data because CRM, for example, just had horrible, it was our dirtiest secret, right? It was not so much a secret, but it was just the reality. The data was terrible in those systems because humans entered it and they did as much as they needed to get paid, right?
That's,
And now when we
you
realize
just
that we can,
encapsulated exactly humans drive right there. Human drive is exactly that. You've
yeah,
encapsulated.
yeah, and we need to flip that paradigm. We've been trying to do that for the last 7-8 years. Is really is how do you have people look at a system as something that's going to help them do their job better, and something they can trust rather than an albatross around their neck, right? Of I don't get paid unless I do this, so I'm going to do the Friday afternoon is CRM day because for Mr. Salesman, right? It shouldn't be like that. This should be something you're looking at. You should be in the system 15 hours a day if you truly like those live and breathe sales guys, because again, it should be headless. It could be you're for us, like with our Connect product, like your Outlook inbox is sugar, right? Your mobile phone is sugar, your tablet is sugar, your laptop sugar, soon your car is going to be sugar, that kind of thing. That's the type of thing. You're going to be talking to your car and you're going to be learning, about, you're going to be getting dictated things about the meeting you're going to, if we ever have in-person meetings again. But, that's the type of thing that we think about, right? Because that's the reality, right?
Yeah.
Your heads up display in your car, your big Tesla panel, it's going to be sugar, right? It should be, that's, these things are merging, right? We've learned right now that we can merge our work lives and our personal lives pretty seamlessly and to good effect. And that's where we see things going. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I'd love to have something that just basically has everything that I need to do, tells me exactly when I need to do it, with who, when, and
Yep.
all that stuff. And just listen to this, right? Just listen to this telling me what to do.
No, exactly. And
It's all managed. It's all perfectly managed on the back end, who I need to talk to, when, and all that stuff. I mean, there's no reason why we can't do something like that soon, because we have all that data and we have all the.
Yeah, but the silos persist for a lot of, let's call them like social, in the sense of like political, cultural decisions, economic decisions. There's all these types of things. There's all these reasons why companies have the silos have persisted. They're breaking down slowly because, again, finally we can bring these benefits and people can accrue these benefits a lot faster and with a lot less work if they make these decisions to go kind of wholesale cloud, go to the right cloud platforms, go to the ones that are a little more open, a little more flexible, a little more interoperable, and you get that, right? And you get this free flowing of data, and you're leveraging APIs more broadly and without, and kind of without fear, right? And all of us, and there's always been these side stories around, everything from GDPR and other privacy stuff, but we're solving those issues, in parallel. And it's been, it's really like the right time for true convergence to happen around this stuff. And that's what's been the problem is, there's the silos persisted, both kind of internally inside the company and how they did that from a departmental layer and the products that people chose and the data, literally the databases being separate to the companies out there providing this stuff weren't doing it in a way that we were all going to work, we're going to play nice, right? And I think we're realizing it makes more sense for us all to play nice, because that's what's going to make it work for the customers to get their setup, get all these benefits we're talking about, and then they're going to stick around because we're all doing great things for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. This is great. Can you tell me how do people get in touch with you if they want more information?
Yeah, it's it's easiest is mschneider@sugarcrm.com. That's my email address. You can always you can find me on Twitter at crmoutsiders.com, and then you can just you could look at the Sugar CRM blog. I write on that pretty frequently. But we also have a lot of great thought leaders at the company that are writing on that. Really, and that's you find me on LinkedIn. Really easy to find. I mean, common name with Martin Schneider, but find the one with Sugar CRM, and that's me. And happy to interact with everybody. Like I said, I'm the easiest person to work with from an advisory perspective, because I don't charge anything, and I don't, because I have a day job, but I just really like helping people. I really like helping people get started, whether you're a practitioner of CX and you're trying to figure out how to make this work, whether you use Sugar or not, or if you're a vendor trying to figure out what all this stuff means. Happy to help, because it's all a good thing, and the good deeds come back to you sometimes.
Well, thank you so much, man. It was great talking with you.
All right, thanks, Chris.
Bye.
Bye.